In this video, I'm going to show you how to connect your light bar to a switch panel. I'll show you how to modify the wiring harness that came with your kit, how to identify the wires, where to cut them, and how to insert them correctly into the switch panel. Stick around. On my last video, I installed a 40-inch light bar on the roof rack. Now I wanted to make a separate video on how to connect the light bar to a switch panel. I literally get asked this question weekly. I've done several videos on installing switch panels in both Tacoma, the 4Runner, as well as separate videos on just how to wire a switch panel. The benefit of having a switch panel over using just the harness that's included with the kit, I think is quite obvious. So basically, we're taking all the wiring that's included with the kit. This particular light bar has two modes, so it has two separate relays. It's got this whole long cable here that has a switch, and most of these light kits, whether it be ditch lights, light bars, pods, will always have something similar to this. A very long wire harness, one or two or more relays, and then a switch. The idea is to make this install quite a bit easier. I don't have to run this switch now through the firewall and mount it in the cabinet because I'm going to be getting rid of all this stuff and connecting it directly to the fuse panel. From that point, now that my switch panel is already mounted inside the cabin, all I have to do is take the wires, connect them directly to the switch panel, and then I can operate everything. I don't have to run anything through the firewall anymore, now that the switch panel is already mounted. The two questions I get asked mostly is, number one, what do I do with all this excess wire harness? Inline fuse, relays, and switch. The second question is, if I have more than one mode, how do I connect it to the switch panel? Well, that second question, it does get a little tricky. There are several types of switch panels. The one I'm using in the 4Runner is the Auxbeam 8-gang. I will put a link to several videos that I've done on this particular switch panel in the description below. It happens to be one of the most popular ones because it's super reliable and the price point is pretty inexpensive. On sale, I've seen it for $110, but typically it goes for about $130, $140. All right, guys, I'm gonna try to get several angles on this. I have this weird lighting and contraption set up, but I have another camera mounted that's looking directly down. So I'm gonna switch over to that camera and you can get a closer look of the wiring and exactly what I'm doing. These are the wires that come from the light bar, and you can see they go into two relays here. So this particular light bar has two modes. It has a driving light mode and a main light mode. And that main light mode is a spot flood combo. That will take about a 14 amp draw. And then the driving light will take about a 1 amp draw. Coming in from the main harness, it goes into two relays. So I have all these wires here. Then it goes into an inline fuse here. That goes directly to the battery. And then it goes into another connection point, and that goes to the actual switch. So I'm getting rid of the switch, the inline fuse, and both relays. This is already connected to the battery, so the first thing I'm going to do is actually disconnect it from the battery. So I have no power coming to these lines. So let me do that first. Now that I disconnected the negative and the positive from the wire harness of the light bar, I'm safe to cut into the harness. So that's what we're going to do right now. I have no power coming to the wire. Please confirm that before you cut into any wires. I'm now going to cut right here. And I'm going to take out my relays, inline fuse, and switch. So all this wiring is gone. Now, could you imagine without a switch box, if you had multiple light bars, ditch lights, pod lights, you would have a bunch of these wires and a bunch of these relays sitting inside your engine compartment. That's one of the advantages of having a switch panel. The other one is you simply connect that to the control box and you don't have to run any wires through the firewall. Coming from the light bar, this is the harness that's now cut. 3 wires. The larger gauge red wire, that will control the main light. The smaller gauge yellow wire, that'll be the power wire for the driving light. And the black wire, which will be the common ground for both. We're going to connect this to the control box now, and you can use these wires exactly as is to insert into the control box. I'm going to show you that shortly. However, I'm going to use Ferrule connections on these, and I've shown this in other videos, and the reason why I use Ferrule connections, and you'll see what they are if you're not familiar with them, is these are stranded wires, and when you insert them into the circuit and tighten the screw to clamp them down, sometimes these strands will split and you won't get good contact. I've had people email me who followed my instructions on installing the control box and they couldn't get their lights to work. And I asked them specifically about this. They ended up using the ferrule connections and then their lights worked. So they had issues with the stranded wires spreading and not making good contact. So looking down right here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8 circuits here with different fuses. I've moved some of these fuses around. For example, you'll see 2 power wires and 2 ground wires. These are for my ditch lights. They draw about 5 to 6 amps. I have that on a 10 amp circuit. This is my light bar for the front, not the roof. This is my light bar for the bumper. That runs on about, I believe, 8 amps, and I have it on a 10 amp fuse, and that's connected right here. So my next fuse is 5 amp. I'm going to run the driving lights for this new light bar on that circuit, on that 5 amp fuse. And then I have a 20 amp fuse next to that, so I swap some of these around. That 20 amp fuse is going to run the main lights on the new light bar we just installed. These are ferrule terminals, and I'll show you a big one so you can get an idea of what they are. You can see it's hollow throughout. The wires go up through the back, and then they go into the nose, and then the nose actually gets crimped. It's a solid piece. The whole nose goes into the control panel and gets tightened down instead of just being the stranded wire, which can spread. So the wire gets inserted inside. Now the wire is actually in the nose right now. And then we take these funny looking crimpers and we actually use the center of the crimper. So this gets inserted inside, and then we crimp the nose. I always do a quick tug test and make sure it's solid in there. And we'll tighten that down. We'll do a tug test, so that looks like it's pretty solid in there. And now we'll do the negative wire, tighten it down. So 5 amp circuit, positive and negative, 20 amp circuit, positive on the red. I'm going to put power back on the circuit breaker. I'll show you the way I routed the wire from the light bar. So it goes from the roof down the side into a KC Hida wire. I'll put a link to that below as well, underneath the cowl here. And then we kind of snake it up and under and follow the factory wire harness, which is zip tied, and it goes all the way across here. Once the wire is over to the driver's side, we put it up underneath the bracket of the control box and then wire it up through. All right, we're gonna hop in the Forerunner here and take a look at how this works on the switch panel here. So this is the actual face of the switch panel. I have 2 on there already connected. The one on the outside here are for the ditch lights, and the one next to it will be the one for the light bar in the bumper. The circuits or the buttons we just connected are on the outside there, the main light for the light bar, and to the right of that, the driving light for the light bar. So let's go test this guy out. Light bar driving light. And the light bar main light. All right, we're gonna get out onto the street at night here and just do a quick test on the main light of the Nilight Pro 40.3 inch light bar. Here's some of the specs, by the way. Main light, spotlight, flood. There's a stop sign way up there. Yeah, it definitely throws far. It's super bright. I might raise it just a little bit more, throw more light higher. As I wrap this video up, I'm going to give you a little view of the light bar from the outside and how it looks. If you're interested in how I installed the light bar, please check out the last video I did. I appreciate you watching to the end and sticking around. Please leave a comment below if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them for you. And remember, life begins where the pavement ends. I'll see you in the next one, guys.